You ever feel a silence so thick, you can hear your own heart breaking? That's what it sounded like the morning they fired me. After 12 damn years. 12 years of showing up early, staying late, covering everyone's mistakes. And still, they smiled when they took everything away. I wasn't surprised. Because weeks before that day, I already knew. And I was already planning my move. Hey everyone, I'm Angelina. And before I get into how I turned my firing into the most satisfying revenge of my life, I want you to do one thing for me. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, this one's a ride. I joined Hartwell and Chase Consulting when I was 24. Fresh out of grad school, full of ideas, and a little too naive for my own good. Back then, the company was small. Just a handful of us working out of a cramped office above a coffee shop. We were a team. Or at least, I thought we were. By the time I hit my 12th year, I was the operations manager. Handling multi-million-dollar accounts, managing staff. And babysitting my boss, Evan Hartwell. Who, by the way, was more interested in golf trips than business meetings. Evan was charming, handsome in that trust fund kind of way. But beneath the smile, he was ruthless. He'd fire people like he was deleting spam emails. No guilt, no hesitation. So when I overheard him one evening whispering my name in a meeting with HR, I froze. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. But something about the way he said, "Replace her quietly," made my blood run cold. Replace me. 12 years of loyalty, and I was a line item to delete. So I smiled. Pretended I hadn't heard a thing. And that night, when I got home, I poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and started building something I should have done years ago. A plan. Not to save my job, but to make sure, when they came for me, they'd regret it. They think the moment they say the words, they break you. Angelina, we've decided to go in a different direction. The HR woman had practiced sympathy. It didn't help. Her face was the same one that had smiled while cutting checks for executives' bonuses. Corporate sympathy is a costume. It never fits right. Evan didn't look at me. He never looked at the people he fired. He leaned back in his chair and folded his hands like he'd just closed a deal. I sat there, breath even, fingers folded in my lap. The room smelled like peppermint gum and stale coffee. Outside, the skyline glittered like nothing had changed. Inside me, something cold and precise clicked into place. I left the office that afternoon with a box of personal things. Paperweight, framed team photo, a plant someone had given me on my 5th anniversary. My colleagues were awkward. They weren't sure if they should hug me or pretend they didn't see. So most of them pretended. Walking down the stairs, I replayed the whispered sentence I'd caught weeks before. Replace her quietly. It wasn't just a phrase. It was a map. It showed me how they thought. How they planned. How small they thought I was. When I got home, I didn't cry. I sat at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. You learn 2 things when you work in operations for a decade. 1. Systems reveal secrets if you know where to look. 2. People always leave traces. My mind started cataloging traces. Password hints. Vendor portals. Old emails with attachments. Contracts saved on archaic shared drives. Middle managers with too much access and not enough oversight. There were holes everywhere because Evan trusted charm more than control. I began with the obvious. I logged into the shared drive I'd helped set up years ago. It still had my admin credentials. Security had been updated, but not enough. People are lazy about passwords. They reuse them. They write them down on sticky notes. They think no one is watching. I pulled the vendor lists. I skimmed the client agreements. I printed copies. I made folders on my home drive, organized, dated, annotated. I created a separate email account. Clean. Untraceable. For now. I didn't know yet exactly what I would do with the files. I only knew I wanted options. I wanted leverage. I wanted a way to say, when the time came, you thought I was expendable. You were wrong. At night, I called people I trusted. A few old contacts from the early days. People who remembered when Hartwell and Chase was a team and not a corporation. They were surprised to hear from me. Flattered, really, like someone had knocked on the door and found a familiar voice. I told them I was taking some time off. I painted a quiet picture. I kept the real plan locked in my chest. Trust is a currency. I spent it carefully. The second week after being fired, a former client called. Olivia Ruiz. She'd worked with me for 7 years. She never called HR. She called me. Angelina, she said, voice breathy. Are you okay? I heard. I told her the truth. Short. Plain. No drama. She swore she'd been unhappy with Evan's direction for months. She missed the structure I brought. She missed accountability. Look, she said. We have a project coming up in 6 months. I don't want Hartwell and Chase on it. If you had your own team. That pause. That sentence. It was an invitation. I started assembling a roster. Not a corporate roster. A roll call of competency. Project managers who had been marginalized by Evan's hires. Analysts who loved data more than poker nights. A developer who wrote clean code and hated meetings. People who worked. People who remembered how to do the work the right way. We formed in text messages and late-night coffee meetings. We kept it small at first. Confidentiality came easy. People who had been ignored by power suddenly had something that mattered, attention. I didn't promise them riches. I promised work that didn't feel like theater. Back at Hartwell and Chase, my absence was a mistake they'd make again. Without me, pipeline stuttered. 2 projects missed deliverables. Suppliers started calling for explanations. Evan paced. He blamed middle management and a lack of talent. He didn't know the truth. There was talent in his old employee base, and I had quietly been gathering them. I built a proposal. Not for revenge. For a solution. I framed it as a boutique operations team for clients who value execution. Clean language. No bitterness. No vendetta spelled out in fonts and margins. My pitch emphasized reliability and integrity, the opposite of Evan's brand right now. The first client we pitched was Olivia's. They gave us the pilot project. Small budget. Big exposure. We executed flawlessly. No drama. No ego. Just outcomes. Within 3 months, word traveled. People started asking who was behind the clean delivery. I let curiosity do its job. I let clients wonder who the quiet force was. Meanwhile, inside Hartwell and Chase, cracks showed. Evan panicked. He replaced staff faster than he could train them. He romanticized growth and ignored process. He made promises to clients he couldn't keep. I watched from the outside as his empire frayed, delightful, but not my immediate aim. I wanted him to look incompetent in the moment people needed him most. I also started planting digital breadcrumbs. Not to ruin anyone. Not to be cruel. To protect myself. To ensure the facts were visible if anyone tried to rewrite history. I archived emails in multiple formats. I saved contracts with timestamps. I documented conversations, dates, participants, accurate notes. If Hartwell and Chase tried to claim I had taken proprietary information, I would have a paper trail showing I had not. If they sued, I would be ready. It's ugly thinking, but necessary. Corporations sue first and ask questions later. Daniel, no, not him. Different Daniel. A different story. For this story, there was a man I trusted for legal counsel. I met him twice. He told me what to keep and how to keep it. He explained confidentiality laws in a way that made them feel like scaffolding rather than prison bars. We wrote agreements. We signed non-disclosure forms. We secured our assets. By month 4, my boutique team had grown into a nimble consultancy with a name that felt honest: Horizon Operations. We had a small office, a whiteboard filled with client names, a coffee machine that smelled like our effort. The first press mention was a short paragraph in a niche industry publication: new boutique firm delivering old-school operational discipline. Evan saw the mention. He called one of the partners, a man he thought was still loyal. Panic in his voice. "Who is this Angelina? How did she get Olivia's project?" His panic was a boon. He started making mistakes that were loud and obvious: missing deadlines, approving the wrong budgets, overpromising. His reputation dipped. Mine rose. People began choosing competence over brand glitter. But I was careful. I never bragged. I never posted celebratory photos. The quieter you are in your rise, the louder the fall will be for those who try to step on you. There were nights when the old wound bled. When the taxi lights outside my apartment felt like a parade of every small humiliation I'd suffered. I allowed myself those nights. They were a pot I stirred, not a fire I let burn. The next morning I was back at my whiteboard. Revenge in the corporate world isn't about scandals and shouting. It's about reclamation. It's about building something so solid that the people who tried to erase you are left watching from a deck of brittle authority as you walk past. And then a moment came, inevitable, delicious, quiet. One of Hartwell and Chase's largest clients, a multi-state retail chain, called. They had a crisis. Supply chain meltdown. They needed a team that could fix it without drama. They called Horizon. The irony tasted sweet. We stepped in. No fanfare. We dove into the data, cut unnecessary steps, rebuilt vendor relationships, and stopped hemorrhaging money. The retail chain's CEO sent a personal note to Olivia and CC'd a few key industry people. Praise floated into my inbox like a warm breeze. Evan watched as his contract got quietly reassigned. His meetings became more defensive. He tried to woo the client back with bonuses and promises. The client didn't need promises. They needed results. We gave them that. At a company-wide meeting, one of those theatrical, staged events Evan loved to produce, he tried to spin his way out. He blamed market turbulence and resource reallocation. He used words that sounded like excuses wrapped in pep talks. His words had no weight. In the back row, former colleagues, people who'd been passed over or ignored, watched him. Some clapped politely. Some didn't. The applause felt hollow. I didn't speak that day. I didn't need to. My work was the voice I let echo. Small victories piled up. A feature in an industry magazine. A referral from a big client. An unsolicited testimonial that called Horizon the backbone we thought we didn't need. With every success, a pattern emerged. Clients who cared about results started reevaluating what they wanted. They wanted substance. Evan's charm didn't fill in supply chain spreadsheets. He couldn't stand in a CFO's shoes and speak numbers eloquently. He'd hired people to paper over his incapacity, and when payback came, the paper tore. Yet I kept a rule. No public shaming. No dramatic social media posts exposing failures. That's a trap. The court of public opinion loves spectacle, but spectacle is messy. It invites lawyers and countersuits. I preferred clean lines. Verifiable success. Quiet dominance. And while I built, I also prepared. I had the documents. The audit reports. The timeline of Evan's decisions. The vendor contracts. If the day came when I needed to show that Evan's leadership had cost clients millions, I could. Not as revenge, but as a factual record. People asked me why I didn't just go on television and say it. Why not make a viral expose? Because truth matters more when it's supported by evidence. Rage is loud, but evidence is permanent. So I waited. I built. I collected. I guarded my dignity like an asset. One evening, at a small industry event, Evan cornered me. He looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the city lights. Maybe it was the weight of poor decisions catching up. "You're stealing our clients," he said, not bothering with subtlety. I smiled. Stealing? Or delivering what you promised your clients but couldn't provide? He flinched, because he knew it was true. "Look," he said, voice softer. Can we talk? Maybe there's a role for you. A partnership." He wanted me back. He wanted the thing he had always wanted, control dressed as reconciliation. I looked at him, the man who'd suggested replacing me while drafting speakership notes for the next big conference, and I felt an old pulse of something. Not anger, exactly. More like astonishment. "You already decided to replace me," I said. "You should know, I'm not interested in stepping back into a place that decided I was disposable." He tried to bargain. He tried to flatter. He tried the old charm. I had options now. Real options. Offers from clients. A team that believed in me. A business with momentum. I left the event and walked to my car, hands in my coat pockets, breath fogging in the night. On the drive home, I let myself smile. Not a grin. Not a triumphant shout. A slow, steady smile that traveled from my chest to my lips. I had not started this to humiliate Evan. I had started it to make sure he could never break someone with a whisper again. To show that competence, patience, and quiet work have power. Months later, when the company's stock dipped after a bad quarter and Evan's board decided a new CEO was needed, people asked who would replace him. They asked if Evan's charm was enough. They asked if loyalty could survive incompetence. They were learning the answer. And me? I kept working. I kept delivering. Because in the end, revenge, real revenge, isn't the moment they fall. It's the life you build after you've been pushed out the door. It's the mornings when your coffee tastes like possibility instead of bitterness. It's the calendar full of clients who trust you. It's the small, relentless steps that become mountains. I wasn't finished. Not yet. But I was on my way. 6 months later, I stopped waking up angry. That surprised me more than success ever did. Anger used to be my alarm clock, the sharp, metallic reminder that I had been discarded. But somewhere between signing contracts and mentoring new hires, the bitterness dulled. What replaced it was something stronger, clarity. Horizon Operations had grown faster than I'd planned. We weren't a startup anymore, we were a contender. Clients came to us because we fixed what others complicated. We didn't talk in buzzwords. We spoke in deliverables. And then, one morning, an email arrived. Subject line, confidential, consultation request from HC Board. Hartwell and Chase. Evan's company. My old company. For a few seconds, I stared at the subject line, half expecting it to disappear. Then I opened it. Ms. Rivera, the board of Hartwell and Chase requests a confidential consultation regarding internal restructuring and process optimization. Please confirm availability for a preliminary discussion. No mention of Evan. No HR middleman. Straight from the board. I let out a slow breath. The irony wasn't lost on me. They fired me. Now they wanted to hire me, to fix what their leadership broke. I didn't respond right away. Timing is everything. If revenge had a clock, patience would be the pendulum. 2 days later, I replied. Available next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Please forward relevant documentation for review. I knew what that meant, access. They'd send me internal data. The same kind of access I once had, and the same kind they took from me. When the files came in, I saw the chaos. Departments misaligned. Budgets off by 12%. Delayed invoices. Client complaints labeled as resolved but never addressed. It wasn't sabotage. It was negligence. The empire had rotted from inside. When I walked into the Hartwell and Chase building again, I noticed everything. The air wasn't the same. The receptionist didn't smile the way they used to. The hallway that once buzzed with energy felt hollow. Corporate ghosts live in soundless corridors. I'd become one of them, briefly, now I was back as the exorcist. 3 board members greeted me in the conference room. The 4th seat, empty. Evans. Miss Rivera, the chairwoman said, offering a practiced smile. We understand you used to oversee internal operations here. Not just oversee, I replied gently. I built most of the framework you still use. A pause. Then, quiet acknowledgement. They knew. She cleared her throat. We're aware Mr. Evans' strategies have led to complications. That was the corporate word for disaster. I listened. Took notes. Asked questions. Professional, detached. But inside, my pulse was steady fire. They wanted a rescue. They didn't realize they were asking the person they discarded to pull them from the wreckage their own choices made. Halfway through the meeting, the door opened. Evan walked in. His tie was crooked. His confidence, chipped. When he saw me sitting there, calm and poised, his steps faltered for just a moment. Angelina, he said, low. Didn't expect. That's because you never planned ahead, I interrupted softly. It's why we're here. The board noticed the tone, not anger, not mockery, just truth delivered cleanly. He sat down, but his eyes avoided mine. The rest of the meeting unfolded like theater. Evan tried to reclaim control, explaining away reports and metrics, turning facts into stories. I countered with numbers. Cold. Verified. Undeniable. By the end of the presentation, the chairwoman's expression told me everything. She'd already made her decision. When I left the building, I didn't smile. Not yet. Revenge wasn't the moment you see your enemy stumble. It was when they had to depend on you to survive. That night, my team celebrated a new client without knowing who it really was. Officially, Horizon had been hired as external consultants for performance recovery. Unofficially, we were rebuilding the machine that had tried to erase me. And the best part? Evan had to sign the contract. His name, below mine. 4 weeks, we worked quietly. I fixed systems. Restored order. Streamlined operations. Every success was a mirror held to Evan's failure, and the board noticed. They invited me to internal meetings. Asked for opinions. Listened. Evan hated it. You could see it in his forced smiles and tightening jawline. One afternoon, as we reviewed the quarterly numbers, he snapped. You're not here to take over, Angelina, he said. You're a consultant. Remember that. The boardroom went silent. I turned to him, voice calm as glass. Of course, I said. Though I find it fascinating you need a consultant to explain how your own company works. The chairwoman's lips curved slightly. It wasn't laughter. It was acknowledgement. After the meeting, one of the senior partners approached me privately. Off the record, he said, the board is preparing a vote. Evan's term might end sooner than he expects. You should be ready. Ready. The word echoed. I went home that evening and looked out the window of my apartment. The city shimmered, full of stories like mine, people discarded, underestimated, quietly rebuilding. I thought about what revenge really was. It wasn't destruction. It was replacement, the natural correction of balance. And when the news broke 3 weeks later, Hartwell and Chase appoints new interim CEO, Angelina Rivera, I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I simply closed my laptop, took a slow sip of coffee, and whispered to the quiet apartment. They had no idea what was coming. The day the announcement went public, the entire office froze. Hartwell and Chase appoints new interim CEO, Angelina Rivera. You could feel it ripple through every floor. Keyboards stopped, whispers traveled like static, faces turned toward screens glowing with my name. And somewhere in one of those glass offices, I knew Evan was watching it happen. He didn't come in for 3 days. When he finally did, he looked like someone had drained the color out of him. Same designer suit, same forced smile, but his confidence was gone. I watched him through the glass, standing exactly where I used to stand 12 years ago. Karma loves symmetry. That week was chaos disguised as order. People suddenly became polite, meetings started on time, and no one raised their voice. Fear has a way of polishing manners. I didn't fire anyone. Not yet. Revenge isn't about chaos, it's about clarity. I started changing the small things first: fair pay, transparent reports, open door meetings where everyone spoke. Slowly, the building started breathing again. It felt alive, something it hadn't been since long before I was gone. But Evan couldn't handle it. He'd built his ego on control, and now every new success felt like a personal insult. He'd hover outside meetings, making notes no one asked for, throwing in little comments about how we used to do it. You could see it eating him alive. Then one evening, the board called a closed-door session. Evan burst in halfway through, face red, hands shaking. "You can't do this without me," he shouted. "I built this company." The chairwoman looked up, calm as ice. "Evan, the audits say otherwise. You didn't build it, you drained it." The room went silent. She turned toward me. "Ms. Rivera, please continue." So I did. I opened my folder and laid it all out: emails ignored, clients lost, invoices hidden, every number he'd buried under charm. 12 years of data, quietly collected while he thought no one was paying attention. Each page landed like a hammer. By the time I finished, no one had to say a word. "I don't want to destroy him," I said quietly. "I just want this place to stand for something again." The chairwoman nodded once. "Then make it happen." The vote was unanimous. Evan's voice cracked. "You'll regret this, Angelina." I met his eyes. "I already did, 12 years ago." He slammed the glass door on his way out. It cracked near the handle, a perfect symbol of what he'd become: smooth on the outside, fractured underneath. That night I stayed late. The city lights spilled through the windows, washing over the conference table where I'd once been fired. Same room. Different power. 12 years ago, I walked out humiliated. Tonight, I walked out whole. But the story wasn't finished. Because revenge doesn't end when they fall, it ends when they finally face the truth you already lived through. And soon, he did. A month later, a headline popped up on my phone. "Former CEO Evan Hartwell declares bankruptcy amid fraud investigation." I didn't smile. Didn't cheer. Karma doesn't need applause, it only needs patience. I closed the article, poured myself some coffee, and went back to work. The company was alive again. People laughed in meetings. We were building, not surviving. That Friday evening, as I was leaving, the janitor, old Rob, the same man who used to mop around my cubicle, stopped me in the hallway. "Funny how time works," he said. "You used to carry stacks of folders down this hallway. Now everyone moves aside when you walk." I smiled. Guess life has a sense of humor. He shook his head. "Maybe it's not humor," he said softly. "Maybe it's justice." His words stuck with me long after I drove home. Because justice doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes, it shows up quietly, in the form of a second chance, a new title, or the peace that comes after years of silence. I never wanted revenge just to hurt him. I wanted the truth to stand taller than the lie. And maybe, that's what revenge really is: restoring balance where it was stolen. 12 years ago, they dismissed me without a second thought. Today, my signature decides the future of the company they said I couldn't survive without. Power didn't change me. It just gave me back my voice. So, if you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or pushed out, remember this. You don't have to scream to be heard. You just have to rebuild so loudly that the world can't ignore you anymore. I'm Angelina. And this was my story. Don't forget to like, share, and comment where you're watching from. Because somewhere out there, someone's quietly planning their own comeback.